what do you like about Porter, and why is he so deserving of Kansas and Kansas State, battling over this kid?
Like we said in September, I think it's just ball skills. It's just unbelievably fluid and natural for Larry Porter. And when you put up the amount of yards that he did, in the Metro, and going against pretty good competition, I would say out at Raytown. I mean, I think it goes to show just again the kind of level of athlete that he is, and how easy everything comes to him. This is going to be a fascinating recruitment, though, because of what you said. It's already a tight timeline for him to, from start to finish, really. I mean, I think KU and K-State have kind of kept in touch, obviously, with him pre-offer. But from the time that both offer till the time he kind of needs to decide is what? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe max?
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with my good friend, as always, Ryan Wallace from GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. This past week, Ryan and I saw Kansas commitment Tate Nagy in Blue Valley West top Shawnee Mission Northwest 35-20, and we'll get to our impressions on that game later in the show, as well as taking a deeper look at the Missouri high school playoffs, giving our picks for who's going to win it all in the Show Me State. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us to grow the show and put us in front of more people like you. Let's start off with some recruiting news. Ryan, Kansas should get 3 alarms here, but we're only going to go with 1 alarm for all 3. And since everybody knows that in this world you go with the compliment or good news sandwich, we'll go good news, bad news. But in this case, it actually comes chronologically. First, Ryan, Kansas added 4-star wide receiver Jaden Nickens from Sierra Canyon. 24/7 Sports' number 29 wideout in the class. He's 6'3", athletic, and headed to Lawrence to play both football and basketball. Ryan, what do you think of this get?
Well, I mean, you said it right there, football and basketball. So, yeah, quite an athlete. But, I mean, and all that translates, speaking about football, all that seems to translate when you watch his tape about, going up and high pointing the ball. And he's got, great catch radius. So all the things that KU needs in this class, needs to replace at that position. The question will be, how quickly he can make the transition to, college Big 12 level football and make those adjustments for Lance Leipold's staff, because, again, Kevin, traitsy and from a raw tool standpoint, it's all there.
Yeah, in his announcement on 24/7 Sports and in subsequent interviews, Nickens mentioned that Kansas talked to him about needing him to be ready to go play early, as the Jayhawks lose their top 4 wide receivers from this season. Some of that should be mitigated in the transfer portal, but if Nickens is going to join that rotation right away, Ryan, as you mentioned, and as we've seen so many times, it often depends a lot less on a player's talent and more on him getting the little stuff right. And so he'll need to arrive on campus ready to work to get.
Hey, real quick, Kevin, before we go to the other news with KU, speaking of somebody that doesn't really know a whole lot about Nickens as a basketball player, what are kind of the odds of him making a dent in that rotation? Or is it more kind of depth and a bench player for Bill Self to have kind of in practice once football season's concluded?
Yeah, I think it's more athletic depth. When you look at it, it's so tough to do both at a high level. In Kansas, if you remember, Ryan actually had a commitment from Keon Coleman for quite a while as a football, basketball guy. And even with Coleman, who I think was probably a better basketball player than Nickens is, with Coleman, I think he played 1 year at Michigan State, was not a huge part of their rotation. And so it's so difficult to do both. So kudos to Kansas for giving him that chance. Kudos to Nickens for being good enough to get that in. But at the same time, I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a guy that you're saying, oh man, like look out there on the court. It's he and Darren Peterson carrying the day for Kansas right now. So now, heading to the bad news, the middle part of that sandwich, Kansas lost a guy that I know you were high on, Ryan. We talked about him on the show, tight end Joseph Skipworth, the Milton, Florida native, flipped his commitment to Mississippi State, announcing his decision over the weekend. That leaves the Jayhawks without a tight end in this class with National Signing Day right around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that, like you said, I think does kind of sting.
Yeah,
I think from a tight end perspective, look, you've got Carson Brune there that you and I have talked about before. We both really thought that was a good pull by KU, and you allow him to redshirt and kind of get his feet under him. But I thought Skipworth would have been a great kind of a compliment down the road in the future, just with his versatility and more importantly, the way that he can stretch the field as a receiver. When you're putting the type of speed at his length and size on tape in a state like Florida goes to show you kind of the level of athlete that Skipworth is. So Jeff Lebby's got a great guy now to, kind of mold over the years. And I think it's a good fit in that offensive system. But yeah, this is one that, I wonder looking down the road though, if, KU, this stings now, but how long is Jeff Lebby the head coach of Mississippi State, right? And could this be maybe one of those in the transfer portal in a couple of years that KU could get back in on? If that's the case, that'd be huge. But as it stands right now, kind of an underrated but stinging kind of loss, at least in my eyes, from the potential that Skipworth has.
Do not burn those bridges, because in today's college football era, what goes around can absolutely come around. And back to the good for the Jayhawks. This week, Kansas added a second running back to its class, this time former Notre Dame commitment Justin Thurman, a talented runner from Jesuit High School in Tampa, Florida. Ryan, I know you said that you had a chance to see Thurman at Six Star Camp. So what are your thoughts there?
So this would have been not this past spring, but the spring before. So it would have been going into his junior season. And I think by that time he was already a Notre Dame commit. I mean, he had been on that commitment for a long time. And so just to give Kansas fans an idea, anybody that has heard us talk about DeZephan Walker over at Ray-Pac, we praised him. I've mentioned that he's, one of the best natural running backs to come out of Kansas City in quite some time. And he's also ridiculous speedster. I mean, he can flat out go in like a 40-yard dash. And I watched Justin Thurman not cook him, but beat him by a couple steps in Six Star's Fastest Man that spring. So that gives you an idea of just how fast Justin Thurman is. He's got kind of a slender build, but you can bulk him up. And, I really like this get for KU. I think that first off, he's a tremendous kid. I mean, you talk to him and just an unbelievable kid that will represent KU in a similar fashion as Devin Neal in terms of getting out in the community and those sorts of things. He taps into the St. Louis market again for KU because although he plays for Jesuit in Florida, he's originally a DeSmet kid out of St. Louis, from St. Louis. That's where his roots are and where his family is. So, it taps into that a little bit. But, I was trying to think of like a guy that might be a comparison for Justin Thurman. And in a way, I think he's probably a little bit better receiver, a little bit slender in his build, maybe not at this point ready to take on contact the same way. But I see some Velton Gardner there, Kevin, just in terms of, again, the athleticism and the way that he can separate in the open field.
I actually like the Taylor Martin comparison. And with Charlie Weiss and David Beatty, a guy that was, pretty track fast and everything. I think, too, they kind of have similar running styles a little bit. I do wonder with Thurman whether the bulking process has started. I think when you look at his senior tape versus his junior tape, you're not seeing, for one reason or another, quite the explosion, not maybe the same number of explosive plays. I wonder if he got a little bit bigger. But to your point, Kansas's strength coach is excellent. And if you look at this being a Gildersleeve project of having a guy who can really run, also has a frame that could bulk up a little bit, I think this is the kind of guy that Kansas wants to take a swing on for sure.
Well, and I will just say this too, knowing what I can remember, and I haven't kept up with Justin Thurman until just now, right? He was destined for Notre Dame all this time. It sounds like it was kind of a mutual parting of ways with Notre Dame. And typically that's more kind of program driven more than prospect driven, I would think, when it's a commitment that's been this long. I wonder if a couple years down the road, Notre Dame's not going to be kicking themselves, because I really feel like Justin Thurman was a kid that maybe they got too into the weeds on the senior stats aren't looking the way that a Notre Dame commitment should look. And, he's been with us for so long. Maybe that kind of the prize that was Justin Thurman had maybe lost its luster, so to speak, at a place like Notre Dame. I don't know. But I really wonder if looking back in a couple of years, Marcus Freeman's going, we could have used him after all.
And let's be honest, Notre Dame has landed some pretty talented running backs too. And so Notre Dame not taking a kid at running back or having a mutual parting, I guess would maybe be the better way to put that, does not necessarily mean, hey, this kid can't be real that good at Kansas. All right, Ryan, time to hit that alarm again. This time for Kansas State, the Wildcats bolstered their receiving core with Trinity Valley Community College wideout J.D. Davis, who committed to Kansas State on Monday. Ryan, what's he bringing to the Wildcats receiving room?
Yeah, well, it was a pretty quick recruitment for him. He had been recruited pretty hard by a lot of Conference USA programs and maybe sprinkled in some Sun Belt there as well. K-State offers, they get him on an official visit over the weekend, and he was plugged in before he left. I think he had already committed on Sunday before he hit the airplane back home to Texas. I think it's a deeper probably project than you would maybe assume on paper, because I think people have seen what Kansas State's receivers have done this year, and they're kind of hoping for somebody to come in and be instant energy and immediate competition, somebody that can complement Keegan Johnson and Jace Brown. And I don't know if JD is going to be that guy right away. He's a sophomore, but he still has a red shirt available, and he's 6'1", like only 170 pounds. He's a willing blocker. But as we talk about all the time, Kevin, both with KU and K-State, when you're a receiver in those two programs, you better be not only a willing blocker, but a good blocker typically. And I'm not sure his body is ready there quite yet to be an immediate impact guy in 2025. So I think this would allow K-State to have some depth with a guy that's got pretty good ball skills, some good separation, good burst. His acceleration is all there when you watch his tape. He'll go up and make some plays. It is a little bit worrisome that like more than 50%, I think, of his season stats came in one single game. So on one hand, it's like, man, he can really ball out. And then on the other hand, it's like, but so much of that came in one game. All encompassing here, I think when you look at Davis, it's again a kid that they think you could get in the program for about a year and a half. And in a perfect world, take him, because he comes in December, take him through this spring, redshirt him next season, then get him ready, kind of gearing up in the 26 spring for full go in 2026. I think if I had to guess, that would be kind of the plan of attack here. But again, you can never have enough guys that can accelerate the way that JD can, and that's what they're hoping, that he can be a versatile guy at that position down the road.
Speaking of Kansas State and wide receivers, Ryan, we try to focus on Kansas and Kansas City recruiting, and Kansas State and Kansas are going to the mattresses for Raytown's Larry Porter. He's going to officially visit Kansas State for the Cincinnati game this weekend, then take his official visit to Kansas early next week. We're getting close to National Signing Day on this one. Ryan, you were early on the Porter bus, mentioning him on this very show.
You are damn right, Kevin.
But before either local school offered him, I might add, what do you like about Porter, and why is he so deserving of Kansas and Kansas State, battling over this kid?
Like we said in September, I think it's just ball skills. It's just unbelievably fluid and natural for Larry Porter. And when you put up the amount of yards that he did, in the Metro, and going against pretty good competition, I would say, out at Raytown. I mean, I think it goes to show just, again, the kind of level of athlete that he is, and how easy everything comes to him. This is going to be a fascinating recruitment, though, because of what you said. It's already a tight timeline for him to, from start to finish, really. I mean, I think KU and K-State have kind of kept in touch, obviously, with him pre-offer. But from the time that both offered till the time he kind of needs to decide is what? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe max. And the visits will be crammed in like right at the end of that kind of timeline. So you've got two really interesting recruiting pitches, Kevin. You've got KU that is able to come in and they'll get the second visit, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or are they getting the first? Second visit. So he'll go to KU second, and they get the benefit of Leon Douglas, who we just had on the show. He's got so many connections in the Kansas City, Missouri area. I think he's known Larry for a long time as well, even before he got to KU. They also have a need, right, at wide receiver. I think there's an immediate need there. And yes, they've got Nickens, and yes, they've got some other guys there, but who's to say Larry Porter can't jump in that mix right away? Then you've got K-State, who, probably doesn't have near the transition from a roster standpoint to make. You would think, we'll see, going into 2025 and beyond. And they have, the luxury of trying to sell Larry Porter. You can catch balls from Avery Johnson. You can be the next kind of dynamic piece in this offense with Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, Jace Brown, Lincoln Cure. So it's going to be two really interesting recruiting pitches for Larry to weigh. And, I don't know, Kevin, and you can correct me if you think differently. I don't really know if there's a leader in the clubhouse either way. This feels very 50-50.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm glad you brought up the playing early point, because I think, with Nickens' recruiting ranking, a lot of people are going to look at that and say this is the obvious choice. And maybe it is, Ryan. But I do think that Porter's polish as a pass catcher is something that can apply from day one. I think he's going to go out, he's going to hit campus in the summer and be out there in 7-on-7 drills and be catching passes like a college junior, because I think that he has that to his game already. And I do think that he's a guy that maybe even could break into the rotation at K-State, if not, have as big a role as he could potentially have at Kansas early. I think he's a guy that could play early at either place, to be honest with you, even though, like you said, maybe not as much opportunity to do so in Manhattan.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's hit Missouri now for a real quick note. The Tigers are battling to keep their top recruit, Lamont Rogers, in the boat. 5-star offensive tackle out of Mesquite. Rogers is ranked as the number 27 player in the nation, regardless of position, by 24/7 Sports. He's the Tigers' highest-rated commitment, but Texas A&M coming on strong. Ryan, we always see things get really wild in the couple weeks heading into National Signing Day, and this feels like one of those recruitments to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Texas A&M's really hard after him, and honestly, Kevin, it's an interesting thing because obviously when I watch the tape of Lamont and you see him here at left tackle, so it's not going to highlight, but he's at left tackle each and every clip that we have here. There's something about his game that is both intriguing and also maybe one. I mean, there's this clip which is fun. I mean, get in there, big man. Nearly stumbles before the goal line. Here's what I was going to say about this from a Missouri standpoint is, on one hand, that tape is of a kid that you're going, man, love to include him in what we've got going on this offensive line. And on the other hand, Kevin, it wasn't like what you expect or what I expected from a guy that's being pulled in so many different directions from so many blue chip programs. I don't want to go as far as to say, don't sweat this if he flips, Missouri fans. But at the same time, it just felt like to me a kid that maybe got overhyped early on at Texas. You see the size and everybody immediately flocks to it. And I'm going, I'm not so sure that what Missouri is also looking at with kind of more lean guys, the Jack Langs, they didn't get Andrew Babalolas, but those type, if that might not better serve them than a Lamont Rogers. And again, I could be completely wrong on this, but I wasn't as taken from those clips as I guess I was expecting to be.
I like the upside a lot with Lamont Rogers. For a bigger guy, he does move pretty well, I feel like. But to your point, the polish isn't there. It's not he's not maybe dominating to the extent that you would expect him to dominate with having the gifts that he has. I really like Jack Lang a lot. We talked about him. I think that he's a terrific get for Missouri. And so, like you said, obviously you want Lamont Rogers in your class, but if you don't, I think you do have to have some faith in the way that Missouri has built up that offensive line, because they've done a really good job evaluating and recruiting that position.
Well, and here's the other thing too, is when you get this close, there's never a shortage of offensive tackles in the transfer portal.
Yep.
They're a premium position in the transfer portal. If you want to go get a guy that you need right away, it's probably going to cost you some top dollar. But if you're just trying to kind of replace I say project, but let's say Lamont Rogers, even though he's 5-star, maybe isn't an immediate impact kind of guy, you can go find plenty of those in the portal from smaller FBS schools or FCS guys that would be thrilled and, wouldn't probably come at near the price tag that Lamont Rogers would, and give you, kind of all that and more, maybe in a quicker time frame, a more condensed time frame than Lamont Rogers if you're Missouri Tigers.
Shifting to high school really quickly, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Goddard Eisenhower's Carter Paps for setting the single-season record for most receiving touchdowns. He already had the career record, Ryan, and after finding the end zone against Topeka Seaman last week, he's all the way up to 28 touchdown snags in 11 games this year. We've talked about Eisenhower being a sneaky state title contender, which means he's going to have a chance to add to that total, potentially 2 games left, and if Eisenhower can get by a hot Hayes team. Ryan, he's committed to North Dakota, but you almost wonder if he doesn't rush into National Signing Day, if there's a receiver-needy team or two that could hop into that recruitment a little bit late.
You nailed it. I think when you look at the tape of him, his senior highlights and what he's doing, the KU and K-State staffs are probably taking notice of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're pushing him to just say, you know what, maybe don't sign early and let's see what we can do with some scholarship numbers and whatnot moving, deeper into January. I don't know, what the height is on him. That's probably my question, having not seen him in person. But boy, the speed is there, and he puts himself in the position to give Derek Morgan, the easy ball while also giving Morgan confidence to throw it into tight windows, because Paps is going to reel it in. To me, Kevin, the one piece of tape that made me a strong believer that Paps can be somebody at the next level is when he's doing it against a Wichita Northwest team. You go throw that particular piece of tape on and you're going, okay, like this makes sense, because again, the way that he's tracking balls, you watch the highlight here, brings it in, is able to withstand the contact. So great agility and balance there. But more importantly, when you see the highlights, to me, it was the separation over and over and over again. Another deep ball here, pretty good route runner, I think. I don't know how elite his route tree is, but he does a little bit of everything. Here's the Wichita Northwest game. When you're doing this against the Grizzlies and a secondary that can absolutely run, and you're putting that kind of distance between you and your defender, to me, that's a proving point if you're Carter Pabst, and something that you can give to local coaches, and they'll know right away, oh yeah, that means something when you're doing that against the Grizzlies.
We're going to break down the players that we saw this past week, the teams we're going to see this week, and make our picks to win the Missouri State playoffs here in a bit. We also want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Winter sports season is arriving, which means hot gyms followed by cold weather outside afterwards. And Home Field has you covered for everything you'll face. T-shirts for the indoors with the heat ramped up, and sweatshirts, jackets, and outerwear. Check out that T-shirt for Ryan. To toss over the top of that shirt when the game is over, Kansas State, and Missouri fans each have more than 40 items apiece to choose from, so head over to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code linked below in the description. You can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Last week, we made our state title picks in Kansas, with Ryan and I differing on 2 of the 3 picks we made. And, well, I've already been proven wrong on one of the 2 ones that I went against Ryan on. So check out that episode and stay tuned on this one for our picks as Missouri gets into the state quarterfinals, because again, we have some differences, Ryan.
Yes, we do.
But before we get there, it's time to give our unsung star of the week some love. With Shawnee Mission Northwest, Joshua Makowitz standing out on both sides of the ball in the Cougars' season-ending loss to Blue Valley West. Ryan, we found out Makowitz is also a hockey player as well. And, of course, SportsCenter has that saying, he's a hockey player and he would return. Well, Makowitz did not have to return, and then I'm not sure he ever left the field in that game.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little odd probably to folks that are like, how are you not going to pick somebody from Blue Valley West? They were the ones that beat Shawnee Mission Northwest. And they had a number of guys that we thought about, complete players. But, you just mentioned it. I thought, the complete game and the complete season that he had for Shawnee Mission Northwest on both sides of the ball. He caught a touchdown pass. He had a big play on defense as well, kept Shawnee Mission Northwest in the game. He's got a good frame. Like, I don't really know what he'll play at the next level. He's not kind of a superb athlete in terms of his speed, but a heady player. And I mean, that shows up on both sides of the ball. Going to Minnesota Duluth to Division II to play football up there. And, I think he'll have a really nice career. I was impressed by just kind of the gamer that he was and the physicality that he brought at his size. I'm very intrigued to kind of watch how his career grows. And maybe he's a guy that in a couple of years can hit the portal and move his way up. Cause I think he's got that kind of like upside if you just give him some time and develop him at the college level.
Of course, the reason we were on hand at Blue Valley West was to watch quarterback Tate Nagy, who's headed to Kansas to play wide receiver. What were your impressions on the future Jayhawk?
He's tiny. My first impression, he's really small. There's short, and then there's also kind of very just thin. I mean, he's going to have his work cut out for him in the weight room. But here's the thing, which we said last week, there is like an aura about him. There's like a moxie and a charisma about him. Shawnee Mission Northwest plays that flex bone, right? And they get into the second half and the flex bone starts to flex its muscle, so to speak. And it's exactly what the Cougars wanted. The problem was they were playing from behind, but I mean, that's what they wanted. And yet every time they got close, it was that whole like, yeah, but now we got to give Tate the ball back. Because with snap of a finger, like who knows what Tate Nagy's going to do. I totally understand now, having witnessed his athleticism and stuff in person. He's so slippery and he's so smart. I mean, there weren't very many plays that you were going, man, he probably like didn't want to throw that there or probably should have gotten out of bounds or what have you. He just understands the game of football so well. Kevin, if he can get his body together, the quicker he can do that, he's going to find his way onto a field because he just has kind of a Luke Grimm gamership to him, but also kind of this, this, I don't know. It's like it's this moxie that he carries himself with, that it's a kind of a quiet confidence that I think he believes in his ability, and he's showing it as a senior. And if he can kind of start to believe in himself and do it against the guys at the next level, I think all that's going to grow at a rapid pace, and he could find himself in a two deep pretty quickly.
He reminds me a little bit of like a Madden creative player, like running around outside the pocket, and you're trying to rush the guy, but he's running all over the place. And, oh, hey, look here. It's 3rd and 12, and he scrambled around for 5 seconds and found somebody for 7 yards. Incredibly difficult to defend at the high school level as a quarterback. Ryan, I had a chance to see him at Kansas camp as a receiver, and the things that you would expect to translate to wide receiver from his skill set did. When he cuts faster than other people. He changes direction better than other players do. He's very difficult to defend. I know we both also came away impressed with Blue Valley West's loss in McGraw. What did you think of McGraw after you saw him in person? And is this another guy that we're going to see local schools really maybe start pounding the table for as the 2026 process keeps going?
Real quick on Tate Nagy, because I just looked this up, because I had the thought, we talked about it a little bit on Friday night, of, maybe from an NFL comp, and I'm going way above and beyond here. It might not ever get to that level, but I went back and looked up Julian Edelman's recruit profile. He was 6 foot 195 when he signed with Kent State. So slightly bigger than Tate Nagy, but again, kind of a quarterback first before he transitioned and became, again, that kind of slippery wideout that I think Tate Nagy could become at KU. On to Lawson McGraw. Again, I said last week, I'm waving the flag early, and he did not disappoint. You don't see a lot of like 6'3", borderline 6'4" in cleats and a helmet type of offensive outside linebackers like we saw from Lawson. He impacted the game. Did he make, force fumbles and, block kicks and all this stuff? No, it wasn't a Ronell Johnson performance for him, but he was in on a ton of plays. And you just see the potential with this kid, Kevin, at that kind of hybrid that every defense seems to be wanting, right, and craving, of that flexible piece that you can move around. And that's Lawson McGraw. And I said it last week, I think he's put on tape to this point already enough to make you wonder if you shouldn't pull the trigger earlier than maybe next summer at camp or something. I think there's enough reason now after seeing him live to just say, we're going to go ahead and go all in. Let's start, KU and K-State. Let's build from the inside out. When you think about local kids in 2026, there's already the batch that's already been offered, but I would put Lawson McGraw very high in that kind of next batch that I would say if I was on staff, I'd be hammering the table to get that done in the winter.
Fun tape club, as we mentioned on this show, but also I think one of the things that stood out was he maybe even ran a little bit better in person than I was thinking. Not that I questioned his ability to move, but that was one of the things that you're just never sure, hey, how's a guy bend and move? I think until you really see them in person. I thought he was pretty impressive there, and really impressive there for a guy with his length and his frame.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. I'm excited to see his off season, and if it gets that far, what his recruitment looks like heading into his senior year.
Ultimately, too much Nagy and McGraw pushed Blue Valley West to the semis, where the Jaguars will take on another flexbone team in defending 6A state champion Gardner Edgerton. But we are headed deeper into the state of Kansas for this week's prospect pit stop, going to the other 6A state semifinal with Manhattan traveling to take on Derby. Ryan, we both already seen Derby this year. I saw Manhattan against Free State. So I guess my main question is, what are you looking forward to seeing from Manhattan in this one?
Man, just looking at that graphic gets me excited. I mean, this is kind of the Kansas version, high school, at least this season, to me, of the Super Bowl. I think that, no disrespect to the east side of that bracket in 6A, but this is kind of the de facto state championship game. These two teams have kind of earned that right, and I just feel like we are going to see a tremendous game. I want to start with Derby, as we seem to always do on this show. And we've talked about Desan Brame. We've talked about Middlebrooks, and you go down the list of the guys, Martell Jackson, the Max Robinson. I mean, we've hit on a lot of names, and yet one of the guys that I'm excited to see for a second time, and I think could be kind of a difference against Manhattan, is the quarterback at Derby, Drew Kemp. He's a guy going into this game that I think has put together a tremendous senior season after transferring over from Mays High School. And his ability to be a dual threat kid in the pocket, I think, is something that I'm interested to see how Manhattan tries to handle. He's been so polished. We weren't sure with Derby coming out of, the Braxton Clark era, what was going to be there at quarterback. And Kemp has played so well in kind of like half the time, right? Because he's only playing like first halves in a lot of games. But I've been really impressed with how he has been putting balls on a dime. I mean, when you've got Desan Brame and his catch radius, you can put, passes up almost anywhere, but he's putting them in places, even if it wasn't Desan Brame, for guys to make big catches. He's also able enough to keep you honest as a defense with what he does on the ground. And I think he's at his best, actually, as a passer rolling outside the pocket.
Yep.
I think that's where he becomes, when you get to that level of Drew Kemp in a game, you're kicking yourself, because now it's like, well, we can handle the Drew Kemp that's the passer, or we can, try and defend the Drew Kemp as a runner. But when you're starting to try and balance between the two, and he's got that level of freedom, look out. And if I'm Manhattan, Kevin, that is what I'm probably most nervous about, because Drew Kemp seems to kind of unlock a lot of things for Derby's offense this season.
Derby's offense was probably going to be good just giving the ball to Arias Finley and the creative ways that they get the ball to Desan Brame. I mean, you don't see a lot of tight ends that get ends arounds and reverses and, are able to take them 50 yards for a score. I agree with you in that I think Kemp has really ratcheted that offense up into the stratosphere because of what he's been able to do. I like the way he carries himself too. I really do. I think that there's a confidence there. I think that Derby was going to be really good this year. I think a big part of the reason Derby is great is because Kemp has been great to this point.
And he's just picked up a Hutch offer. So, I mean, I think some of the collegiate action is coming. He's not the tallest guy in the world, but I think, again, he's proven himself as a passer this season. To have a guy like Drew Dallas go, yeah, there's something there that we could work with. So I think, the more he can put on tape here at the end of the season, maybe the more that starts to, happen and hit the ground running in terms of a late recruitment.
Drew Dallas knows his quarterbacks, and Manhattan's coach Sharks knows his quarterbacks as well. He's got a really good one in Carter Aslan.
Yeah, you've talked to me about him, and I'm excited to see him. We mentioned him on the show. Obviously, J.J. Dunnigan is a guy that everybody knows. And Kamario Davis is a guy that we haven't touched on a whole lot on this show that I was able to see at K-State camp that I think, has a great load of potential. And yet it hasn't really been him that's been doing a lot of the damage out of the backfield. It's not Aslan. If it's not Aslan, it's Jaden Hudley. Jaden Hudley, man, this tape, again, team fun tape here, reminds me a lot of Ty Suggs. If I got to, make a throwback to my days as the K-Man sideline reporter for Manhattan High School and Joe Sharts' first season as head coach, Ty Suggs was a kid that was built the same way as Jaden, more kind of fullback in that offense than halfback, and yet had some breakaway speed. I mean, you watch some of the cuts here. I mean, he's light on his feet and then will toss you like that. And then, make you watch him run to the end zone. It's more complete tailback than I was expecting out of, again, that kind of H-back role in that offense. I'm pumped as all hell to see Jaden Hudley. And again, with Derby, we've talked about how solid they are, in fundamental tackling and that sort of thing. You got to be on your P's and Q's when you're coming up into the box and making open field tackles on Aslan, on Davis, on Hudley. They are so physical, Kevin. And I think that goes down the line with this Manhattan roster. And they've got enough kind of athleticism and spark there to also go head-to-head with some of the skill guys that Derby has. I just think this is going to be such a battle of two really kind of evenly matched teams. I mean, maybe Derby's got a little bit more explosion, a little bit more this, but then you can come back and say Manhattan's got more this and more that. They complement each other so well. And here's the other thing that intrigues me about Manhattan is, again, with Derby, this is kind of a senior class and a junior class that it feels like they've kind of held some high hopes for, but weren't sure until we got here. And now they're delivering. And then with Manhattan, when you start going down that roster, it's a lot of guys, Kevin, that are younger brothers of players that we remember kind of being badasses for Manhattan a couple of years ago. I see Vikander on there. I see the last name Hoover on there. There's some guys that I'm like, okay, you come from a family tree where, you've grown up around Manhattan football and successful Manhattan football. They're going to be determined to continue that on Friday night and kind of stamp their spot on Manhattan High history books by beating a team like Derby and getting back to the state championship game. I'm on pins and needles. Like, I wish tomorrow was Friday. Let's get there.
Manhattan, of course, knocked off Derby on their way to a state title 2 years ago. Then last year, Derby returned the favor in terms of knocking Manhattan out of the playoffs. So not saying necessarily there's bad blood, because I think there's a lot of respect between both programs and certainly between those coaches, but certainly two teams that know each other pretty well from playing each other at the highest possible levels.
Yeah, I mean, this, like I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful, and go ahead and clip this all you want. Gardner and Blue Valley West, whoever wins, clip it, put it on every motivational tape, throw it back in my face. But this just feels like it's going to decide the 6A title.
When Kansas reached the state quarterfinals, we gave our picks to win state in the big classes, and now it's time to do the same for Missouri. Once again, Ryan, we agree on one and differ on two others. So again, let's start on where we agree. This time, Lutheran North to win it all in Class 4.
Yeah, I mean, they're the powerhouse, right? They've just been destroying people. I think they've got, when you look at like the offensive output per game versus the defensive, what they've given up per game, it is the best in terms of the margins. It's the most on offense. It's the lowest on defense in the state of Missouri, at least of the kind of powerhouse St. Louis schools that you look at. And this is a team, Kevin, that beat Cardinal Ritter this year. And we'll get to Cardinal Ritter in a little bit with Class 5, but like, I think Lutheran North has all the components to get there. From a Kansas City perspective, Kearney is probably the one team that could stand in their way. And I think, from people I've talked to, Kearney's got a pretty legit defense, but maybe they're not quite where they were on offense a year ago. I just wonder when you face a Lutheran North team, if it's one of those things that you don't know what you're getting into until you're in it. And they just strike me as a team that is just too powerful to get upset in Class 4.
Lutheran North's lone loss came out of state when the Crusaders fell at Central High School in Alabama road trip in the season opener. Since then, 10 straight wins, with 8 of them by at least 30 points, 9 by at least 2 scores. That includes an 80-point win last week, Ryan. And their closest game, a 2-point win over the aforementioned really good Cardinal Ritter team that's still alive as one of the top teams in Class 5. Let's go ahead and get to Class 5 because this is one of those groups where we differ. So who's your pick here?
Class 5A on the Kansas side, I went with a sleeper in St. James. And on the Missouri side, I'm sticking with Kansas City. I got to throw some love to the local teams. And this would be an upset. I mean, it really would. Make no mistake about it. Platte County winning Class 5 for me. They would have to play. They would have to beat Cardinal Ritter. Obviously, I think we would both agree Cardinal Ritter's probably going to get there on one side. I think Platte County's would be there on the other side of the bracket. I might be a little premature with Platte County here, Kevin. I might be a year ahead with, Rocco Mariette and Jack Oots and number of other guys that are just juniors on this Platte County team. I might be ahead of myself, but here's where I'm thinking. Cardinal Ritter is the team that's got everything to lose. They're the team that everybody's scared of. They've got like 5 or 6 guys in like the top 20 in the state of Missouri in the class of 2025. So senior players that are going to go play at the highest levels in college. Just a freakish roster. And yet Platte County is one of those teams to me that the way that they're playing, the way that they went through St. Pius, that I think is a pretty good, projection of what you're going to see deeper down the line. Are they Cardinal Ritter? No. But I think if Platte County can get there, they're going to have so much like confidence riding into that game that I think, again, you kind of start thinking about playing with kind of house money versus everything to lose. And when adversity strikes, does Cardinal Ritter start to question themselves at all? Do they start kind of pointing the fingers at each other in terms of, or instead of fixing things, right? And I'm getting super hypothetical here. But again, I'm trying to paint the picture that I think if Platte County can get there and face a team like Cardinal Ritter, they're going to be so driven to play, the Rocky role, so to speak, that I think they can get it done. I think they've got a quarterback, most importantly, at the most important position, that can get it done.
Yeah, I think Platte County is awfully tough. And it's kind of funny because I feel like Class 5 is playing out like 5A did for us.
Yeah.
Not well for me on the Kansas side, where I picked, sort of the traditional power, probably the favorite maybe in Mill Valley. You went with the sleeper in St. James Academy. Mill Valley season's over. St. James Academy still playing. This will be interesting to see if that replicates that. Look, we've talked on the show about what a terrific passing game the Pirates have, and they're a more complete team, I think, even beyond that. But I have to go with the Cardinal Ritter College Prep Alliance. Their lone loss came by 2 points to Lutheran North. I am right there with you in that I think we got the same state title game matchup with Cardinal Ritter taking on Platte County. But I think Cardinal Ritter is going to win that one. I really love all the offensive weapons that they have. Pirates have a likely power 4 trio in quarterback Carson Boyd, who's going to Illinois, running back Jamarian Parker going to Nebraska, and receiver DeJarian Miller, who hasn't made a decision yet, but is deciding between those sorts of schools. Talking about 3 of the top 9 players in the state of Missouri, and they're all on offense. But they also have a bunch of like group of 5 players on defense that I think could slow down Platte County's offense, including edge Charles Brooks. They've got 3 DBs who are really, really good: Tyron Parker, Vanaz Cobb, and Antonio Parker. That would be a really heavyweight matchup, I think, in Class 5 if both of those teams were to make it through. And I hope I'm not spoiling anything here, Ryan, but Cardinal Ritter has a win this season over your pick to win Class 6.
That's they do, Kevin.
So with that tease, Ryan, who you got in Class 6?
Again, on paper, this might be kind of going against the grain. I'm taking DeSmet out of St. Louis. John Merritt's squad, I've gotten to know some of the staff over there through the 6-star camps, and I think just tremendously high of them. And Coach Wagner at Lutheran North, you and I met him over the offseason, tremendous guy. So a lot of good coaches that are still alive on the Missouri side of the bracket, even at the St. Louis area that you and I are kind of familiar with. And so when I think about DeSmet, and again, maybe that'd be this side, comes into play here a little bit. But again, to me, you've got to have a quarterback that can get you there first off, let alone win it. And I think the world of Dylan Duff, the Kansas State commit.
Yep.
I think he's super underrated. I think he carries himself in a way that, when the playoff lights come on, like he wants it. Have they been great this season compared to, DeSmet teams of the past? No. They lost to Cardinal Ritter and lost to CBC in games that really I don't think were that close on the scoreboard. And yet I think they've got the components here where I look at the bracket and I think they've got a favorable way to get to Columbia. And if they can get to Columbia, I think they've got enough then to get it done. You've got the quarterback on offense with Dylan Duff. You've got Jason King kind of as the senior quarterback of the defense at linebacker that's headed to Missouri. You've got the junior defensive end in Titan Davis that'll be a top 3 guy in the state come next season. They've got enough pieces there. They've got the coaching. I think they are built to take on a Liberty team that I'm assuming it'll be Liberty that'll beat Park Hill. So don't mean to get ahead of myself, but I think they've got a defense that can handle Liberty and make them kind of more one-dimensional. And we saw that Liberty offense, right? They're driven through their offensive line. I think Smet's got enough guys up front, right, to maybe take them out of their comfort zone. And then you can get to Columbia and let Dylan Duff kind of go to work. And it might not be pretty. They might grind out the way all the way to the state championship and not be as decisive as a Lutheran North or a Cardinal Ritter. But I like this DeSmet team, and I think once they get there, I think your pick, Kevin, as I throw it back to you, has a little bit more obstacles in front of them just to get to Columbia. I like DeSmet's path. They'll have to go to Kansas City first, especially if they play Liberty, to then get to Columbia. But I like DeSmet to kind of be the unsung of the powers in St. Louis to get it done.
I can't argue with any of that. Like I like the pick. DeSmet looks loaded, and there's nothing that helps you out more this time of year than having a great quarterback in the playoffs. And DeSmet has probably the best quarterback left when you're looking at not just, Class 6, but through the Missouri playoffs. Even so, just for the sake of pushing back a little bit, I'm going to go with 11-0, undefeated Lee Summit North. Look, it sounds weird to say about a team that hasn't lost, but I actually think the Broncos' A game is still ahead of them. Mekhi Mitchell's playing a good quarterback, and they've got all kinds of weapons around him, including, of course, Isaiah Mosey, who can break a game open. On defense, you have future big-time guys like Kamori Moore Chase Pearsall. In 2027, Caleb Green, who already has Power 4 offers. But I also like Saron Harrison, who's made a number of big plays this year for him. And like I said, I think it's somewhat scary that they're unbeaten when, to be honest, I'm not sure they've reached their full potential yet, Ryan. And you can look at that as a positive thing or a negative thing. You can say, hey, they haven't been, even though they're undefeated, they haven't maybe been at the level of, we just talked about Derby. Like Derby has put it on tape that they are just the most dominant force in Kansas football right now. Lee Summit North keeps winning, but I'm not sure that they've quite taken that extra step that I think is available to them, but it's not there yet. Here's the thing. They probably have to find that level here in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
If they're going to beat that DeSmet team, because I don't see Lee Summit North coming in, playing DeSmet, bringing a C+ game, and coming out of that game with a win. Should still be a lot of fun to watch it. And Ryan, college prospects all over the field between those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets that far, I did think, again, when I looked at the bracket for Class 6, I saw Lee Summit North having to go and play a really physical, tough Nixa team that loves when the Kansas City teams fall on their side of the bracket. Jackson Cantwell is a guy that you can literally run behind and do anything behind. I think he's the best player in America for the 2026 class, so they've got to go through him. And then I think, Kirkwood is dangerous up top. There's no CBC on that side of the bracket, but Kirkwood has some dudes here. I get DeSmet's got to go through Rockbridge and again, a Liberty team that you and I are really high on, but
I do like DeSmet's path. Like, to your point, I do like DeSmet's path better.
Yeah, I wonder if Lee Summit North can be locked in, and not make the mental mistakes that can kill you against the Nixas, the Kirkwoods of the world. We'll see.
Well, and it sounds like we're talking badly about Lee Summit North. It's like they're undefeated. Like it's, it says something when you can come out and not play your best and still win. And in some cases still win by a little bit. Like I said, I do think that the upside is there. And I think there's a pretty good chance that they reach that upside. And so that's why they're my pick.
If you had a ticket and let's say it gets to Lee Summit North, DeSmet, and Platte County, Cardinal Ritter, and you can only go to one of those, which one do you think you would want to go to?
Ooh. See, from our job standpoint, I would probably go to Class 6.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But from a fun standpoint, because you've got not just college prospects all over the place in Cardinal Ritter, but I also think, we don't root for anybody here, in terms of one team to win or another. But I do think, Ryan, to your point about Platte County, one of the things that's so cool about high school sports is when you do have sort of that prototypical giant, the David and Goliath matchup. And calling Platte County David maybe isn't fair to Platte County because they're really good. But I do think that it's the sort of thing that if Platte County wins that game, I mean, that's something that people around Platte are talking about the rest of their lives, potentially. Like, hey, remember when we beat that Cardinal Ritter team that had 80 bajillion D1? And so I think that element of it almost adds like a movie theater like type part to it. And so I think I would probably go to Class 5. How about you?
Ditto. I'm just short and sweet. If I was covering a game, I'm on the sideline or whatever, probably Class 6. But if I'm just a ticket, just, an innocent bystander up in the stands, give me Class 5 for all the reasons that you laid out.
Well, if you guys are picking which entertainment to be watching, we're glad that you decided to stay here with us. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail and take care.